Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we're coming off a pretty big interview here at On the Verge as International Scouting Director Kobe Perez joined us this afternoon to talk about the Orioles international signing period, which just passed on Saturday, headlined by Braylon Tavera, Cesar Prieto, among others. So Kobe gave us a lot of great insight, and you can listen to that on the audio version of this podcast when it is released later on. If you're watching us live now, you're not going to see the interview immediately, but we are going to talk about it here, and then you can go back and listen to it later on. And we'll have that tonight, as well as a look at the international free agency class, the news about the fences moving back at Camden Yards, and DL Hall throwing off the mound today, which is pretty big news on the injury front. Good sign for his recovery. We'll talk about that all tonight, but first we'll get into the interview with Kobe Perez and shout out our latest patron to join our Patreon community, and I'll turn that over to Bob.
Yeah, we had another new patron. Seems like we're getting one a week. Hey, I'll take that every day. That's pretty cool, exciting. Newest member is Logan Pretty, and he's sitting pretty as the newest member of the patron. So thank you, Logan, for joining us.
We appreciate the support of all of our patrons and all of our listeners. Kobe Perez joined us earlier today and gave us a lot of great insight, not just about the players that they just signed, that the Orioles signed over the weekend, but about what goes into signing these players, the years of scouting that are involved, and sort of how their philosophy has evolved in the last few years. So there's a lot to unpack from that interview, and I'll let Nick start just kind of with his general thoughts. What was your biggest takeaway from the discussion with Kobe?
It's difficult not to give away so much for the people listening live, but yeah, he seemed like just a genuinely good guy, and I can't thank him enough for giving us time, sitting down and talking with us, almost 20 minutes, which was absolutely amazing. I just got the sense that this organization is definitely hard at work and putting in the good work behind the scenes, and they are 100% dedicated to making sure that the Orioles are one of these elite franchises in terms of scouting and getting good quality, high quality international talent. I mean, the players as well. The thing we've talked about this a lot is like the trades they made last year, the Gene Pintos, the Isaac De Leons, the Michel Desons, getting these guys as we think is throw-ins to deals when clearly they are not throw-ins, or if they are, let's say they are. The Orioles are doing a fantastic job identifying these guys that get overlooked, the guys that don't get the big signing bonuses. And right off the bat, Kobe Perez talked about that. Not all those great international players that you see at the major league level got the super high bonuses. And the Orioles are done a fantastic job, I think, of identifying these mid-range guys, those sleeper guys. And then once you get them into the system, we know what this player development staff has been capable of so far. So I think it's a perfect marriage that's starting to work out. And now we got to see if it works out at the major league level, of course, but fantastic interview. I'm excited for everybody to listen to it, and I'm excited to have him back on again next year.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was amazing to get to talk to him. And the number one takeaway for me was just how cohesive this front office is. It seems like the entire thing just moves as a unit. They all know what they're doing. They're all on the same page. Everybody's hands on. Mike Elias is down, recruiting like he's a college basketball coach and getting these guys to come sign up for the Orioles and pick the O's over other teams when they can only offer similar amounts of money. So it just seems like everyone's on the same page, and no matter what the major league product has looked like the last few years, I know once the ball gets rolling here, it's going to be all good things to come.
It was interesting to hear from me about the players that were beyond like the big headline signings, and in particular, Thomas Sosa is a player that really jumps out at me from the way that Kobe Perez discussed him, and the fact that the Orioles really started to scout him at age 13. I mean, that shows you the amount of years that go into it. To pick up Sosa now at 16, add him to the system, 6'4", center fielder, hits from the left side, projectable power. We have tweeted out clips of him taking batting practice, and the swing looks really good, but that's only going to tell you so much. So to hear from Kobe Perez about, how they've already seen him develop physically and how they believe that he's going to project to hit for a lot of power is really encouraging.
Yeah, I tweeted out when they put the photos, his signing photo up. Like, I don't know what it was. It was just purely my gut. And like, I drink craft IPAs like it's water. So like, it's a big gut. I trust it. And all day Saturday, like it just kept telling me Thomas Sosa is your guy. Right. And I loved what Kobe Perez had to say about him. That only reinforced that. When I see the video, like my untrained, non-scouting eyes, it sees like that huge frame and so much potential when that fills out. Young, raw player. I said in the interview that I just got like this Michel Deson vibes, that raw, toolsy player, someone that when this player development staff gets their hands on and he matures and becomes an adult in 5 to 6 years, this is going to be potentially be a big impact, corner outfielder in this system. So yeah, Sosa is definitely one that I'm hugely intrigued by.
Yeah, it's got to take a unique skill to really scout these kids this young and know how to project them out 10 years down the line, when they're probably going to be hitting the real major league prime if they get that far. It's a real skill, and I'm glad we have a guy who's proven to be successful at that with the Cleveland organization, and now he's so far so good here as far as the early returns, and it's pretty exciting. Like you said, a lot of these international players going to show up in Delmarva this year. Probably half the roster is going to be filled with those guys. So we finally get to see them stateside, get some video on MILB TV, and see what they got.
The Dominican Summer League is really where you're going to see the players that were signed this year, other than Prieto, who's probably going to go somewhere in the mid to high minors. Is kind of what we're expecting. But really, if you follow Delmarva and the FCL next year, you're going to be seeing the early returns on the work that Kobe Perez and Mike Elias have put in international scouting, not just in signing players, but picking players up in trades. So if you thought that Gene Pinto being in Delmarva last summer was exciting, because it was, then I think that next summer is going to be even better there.
Yeah, because he'll be in Aberdeen.
Exactly. Yeah, right down the road from you, Bob.
That's right. I'm psyched. Let's go.
Yeah, and just look at like the progression as well as something that I noted, because this is what, year 3 of their signing classes. So that first year they didn't have any time to connect with these kids. So that class is kind of I think we can go back and maybe identify a few guys who have progressed and developed into intriguing pieces. But last year we saw the Michael Hernandez and Samuel Basayo, and Kobe Perez got me even more excited about Basayo, which is hard to do when you watch that kid swing. But now you're signing arguably the top hitter out of Cuba. The Orioles doing this. You're seeing them take 10 guys out of Venezuela. You're seeing them continuously dish out higher and higher bonuses to more elite talent. And one of my favorite things that he said was, the Orioles are giving these kids their pitches. And someone like Braylon Tavera, Edwin Amparo was another one that I think he said was getting a lot of love from a lot of other teams that really wanted to sign him. The Orioles are going down there, giving them their pitches, sending Brandon Hyde, even not just Michael Elias, but Brandon Hyde down there as well in Preto's case, and saying, here's what we got, here's the opportunity. And these guys are excited to become members of the Baltimore Orioles. So I can imagine next year when we have Kobe Perez on, are we talking about a top 10 guy? If there's no draft, of course, but like we're trending in that direction. I think we're trending in that direction very quickly, considering, like in Sosa's case, start scouting him when he's 13 years old. This takes time, and the Orioles just seem to be doing this pretty quickly.
So coming out of that interview, was there a player that either of you were maybe not that familiar with? I know I already mentioned Sosa, but was there a player that either of you were not really familiar with that you're now really excited to start following?
The only name I can think of is Gene Mata. I think he mentioned him as an outfielder that, that isn't getting a lot of publicity, but is right up there with the other outfielders that they signed. And I would say Sosa, because that's exciting. A big, tall guy like that with the power potential could hit the warehouse. Somebody's going to one of these years. So, yeah, I say Gene Mata just because that was a name that I really didn't know of.
Yeah, Mata was definitely interesting, for sure. I think it has the guys we talked with him about is definitely has to be Sosa. To hear how quickly he matured as well physically is super exciting. I wish we had more time because there are some other kids on this list that I've been trying to find as much video as I can, and we've gotten a lot, but there's some that there's just nothing out there yet. But some of the kids like Jose Naguero, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but some other kids that I had noted put stars next to their names, like Jose Naguero, a catcher out of Venezuela they signed. I love that swing. I love how physically matured that kid looks. And Henry Tejada was a pitcher that I wanted to ask him about. We didn't ask about any pitchers. And we know Orioles fans and pitchers probably wanted some of that information, but like, this kid looks like he's 9 if you look at pictures of him, but on the mound, he's got some good secondaries already and looks a poised, mature pitcher on the mound. And I'm excited to see what these kind of unheralded names turn into in a couple of years.
Yeah, so it was really good to hear from Kobe, and we're excited to follow these players, not only the ones that were just signed by the Orioles, but the ones that are already in the system from previous international free agent classes that are going to be moving up. And we'll have a little bit more detailed breakdown next week when we have our top 50 prospect list update, the first one of 2022. We'll tease it a little bit more later in the show, but just wanted to throw that out there now to make sure that you're listening next week. Moving on now to what was a pretty big story late last week into the beginning of this week for Orioles fans, and that's the news that the left field wall at Camden Yards is moving back. After following the original dimensions since 1992, the Orioles are going to move the left field fence back by as much as 30 feet in some parts, while raising it to about 13 feet in height. So the news really comes, the question that has really come up since then is why. And, what has been cited over and over again is how homer friendly Camden Yards has been towards right-handed hitters. And while this is not going to make Camden Yards a pitcher's park or even a neutral park, at least according to most projections, it is going to, bring down that effect a little bit of this being an extreme home run hitter's park. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, but since we are a minor league podcast, we do want to kind of take a forward look to and figure out who this is going to benefit in the long run potentially. And I'll just start with Bob. Looking at this from a higher overview perspective, your thoughts on moving the fence back and what you think it could do for the Orioles in 2022 and beyond at the major league level.
I've been pretty on board with what Mike Elias has been doing all these years, and he's making the right moves behind the scenes, but this is just a step too far. You're going to change the ballpark? Are you kidding me? No, I think this is fine. I thought John Muley had a pretty great column in his newsletter this morning about how it seems like Orioles fans will just get angry about anything, and completely agree. I think it's about time we got a little bit more neutral, and I'm sure guys like DL Hall, who we mentioned started throwing again today, and Grayson Rodriguez, I'm sure they'll be grateful for the help, and they can use this as a convincing argument for if they trade for a top line starter and they want to extend them and keep them around. Hey, we did this. You don't have to worry about your numbers so much. Same with free agent signings. And if you look at the top 15 or so of our prospects, I mean, you got Adley Rutschman, who is a switch hitter and can hit the ball out of, the polo grounds. You have lefties in Gunnar Henderson, Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, Kyle Stowers, Taron Vavra, and Kobe Mayo. I don't think he's just laughing and thinking, okay, just, that doesn't make a difference to me. And we saw Ryan Mountcastle only would have lost like 1 or 2 home runs based on the awesome chart that I can't remember. Is Andrew Perpetua, I think, put out there. So, yeah, I think it's kind of good strategically for where the Orioles are as a system, but I think it's just going to be better for the product overall. Get more balls in play, some doubles and triples. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I honestly at first had no opinion whatsoever. Being so consumed over the weekend with these international signings and that fun that Orioles fans can have with that now. But sitting down and thinking about it, like Camden Yards isn't going to turn into, Petco Park. That left field is not going to turn into like Petco Park Power Alley where balls just die. Even Fernando Tatis and Manny Machado can't crack through that thing most nights, it seems like, watching Padres games. But Orioles hitters will learn how to adjust. They're going to take advantage of these new dimensions. Like Bob mentioned, and a lot of other people have mentioned jokingly, but not jokingly, because, Mike Elias plays chess, not checkers. And all those heavy power hitting lefties are coming up through the system. But like the biggest thing was Mike Elias admitted, that free agent pitchers don't want to come here. And it's extremely hard to get those pitchers. And this isn't going to attract, an elite frontline starter as soon as the lockout's over. But if it helps where free agent pitchers, middle pack free agent pitchers that can help this team, not Felix Hernandez, who's, got 2,000 innings under his arm already. If it helps those guys not immediately cross the Orioles off the list and lets the Orioles talk to them and have a chance, then that's going to help, And you mentioned John Muley's piece. I thought this quote, let me pull it up here. I thought this hit the nail on the head. He says, and yet the backlash has been vocal against it, the wall move, for aesthetic reasons. It's nice to care about such things, even if it ignores the fact that the B&O warehouse is where the eye is drawn at Camden Yards anyway. It took this ordeal to distill what surrounds every aspect of this Orioles rebuild to one simple choice. Would you like everything to be the way it always has been, or would you like the Orioles to win at some point? It's fine if the answer is the former, but the 3+ years into this Elias era, there's a better chance of Chris Davis comeback than that mindset winning out. Yeah, and everything, the areas that the Orioles have seen the most change are also the areas that they've seen the most improvement. I think that's a good argument to me.
Yeah, and I saw what John Means. It would have, brought back 5 or 6 of his home runs that he gave up at Camden Yards to the left field side. So I think he's pretty happy with this news as well.
When the initial news broke, Nathan Ruiz had it at the Baltimore Sun about the middle of last week. There weren't renderings at that time. There were a lot of questions about how it was going to look. The renderings came out later in the week, and then Sig Mejdal and Mike Elias were in a press conference on Friday. And over the course of that press conference, one of them, it may have been both of them, I'm not entirely positive, mentioned PNC Park as having similar dimensions to what the Orioles are trying to do in left field. I've been to PNC Park a few times. I've watched games there on television. Had never really paid attention to how the left field wall looked. But when I looked at it today on, as an aerial shot, it works. Aesthetics are fine. They have that weird bird cage by the foul pole where people stand to watch the game. But other than that, it's fine. And, it doesn't hurt the dimensions there one way or another, I think. I don't think it makes it an extreme hitter's park or an extreme pitcher's park. Now, there's going to be other things that factor into that, which they alluded to in the press conference, which is the weather, how the baseball is actually going to be made in future seasons, which is a big open question. But, I think there's a possibility here to neutralize it a little bit, which can probably help, like Nick mentioned, help draw in some starters that are in that mid-tier of the free agent market, which is really what you're going to be left with on the other side of the lockout to come to Baltimore. And then I think after a few seasons of data, you might get a frontline starter who hits the free agent market and sees, okay, over the last 2 or 3 years, home runs have been down at Camden Yards. The team is getting better. I feel comfortable signing there. And if the Orioles, put the money out there to get an ace-type pitcher, that can make it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe this will convince Michael Pineda to sign once the lockout's over or someone along those lines. But, Michael Elias could have just released DJ Stewart. He didn't have to, run him out there to get impaled on the corner in left center field. There are better ways to go about this.
Yeah, I think just statistically speaking from a game aspect, right, it's not going to be a massive difference. And we've seen some initial articles, like even Pitcher List, there's a great article there that's done a little bit of research. And, they've noted it's small sample size data, but it's not going to be an extreme out. Maybe if you're Austin Hayes, apparently this might hurt him a little bit more than others. But that's a whole nother, conversation about Austin Hayes in 2022 moving forward, I think. But, it's not going to be this extreme outlier anymore. Hopefully, with this change, Camden Yards isn't this extreme outlier. I think it was Vivek there in an earlier comment that just popped up that said, "Hey, a lot of these guys, your Dean Kramers, your Zach Lauthers, that sophomore class that's coming back next year. Hopefully, we see them in the majors next year, and some of these rookies coming up, DL Hall, Grayson Rodriguez, Rodriguez for sure being in the majors next year, more than likely at least." Like maybe it helps their confidence a little more if they're not giving up that extra 1 or 2 home runs. Every little bit, I think, helps. And I mean, aesthetically, if it's aesthetics is the reason that you're so against this, like that's fine. Like you do you. But like I don't think anyone's ever looked at that wall during a game and been like, that is a beautiful piece of architecture. That just makes this ballpark. It is perfect. Like it was a 7-foot wall. I think it'll be okay.
Yeah, and it's honestly it's also good because we have a bunch of good rangy outfielders that can go out in left field and get the ball. Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins eventually could potentially move over there. Cowser, Ryan McKenna. I mean, he is a 4th or 5th outfielder on this team, and he's basically a center fielder that if he plays left field now he can go get these balls and teams are going to come in with a lot of teams like the JD Martinez's of the world just put your weak bat in left field or weak arm. So this is another thing that could play to our advantage, just the way the team is currently constructed.
I do want to talk about Austin Hayes and DJ Stewart for a minute. we've had a lot of our fair share of grievances about DJ Stewart's defense, and you would think that a deeper left field is going to make some of those problems more glaring. Hayes should have no problem covering this ground. I really don't think that's going to be a problem for him, but I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on sort of your immediate outlook for him, because over on the Warehouse, fellow show here on BSL Radio, Stephen Loftus, Matt Corey, and Chris Stoner talked about Austin Hayes a little bit. I think Stephen and Matt are more the mindset that Hayes is probably a fourth outfielder on a contending team unless he starts walking more and hits for more power, and then the health is obviously a big issue. But what do you guys think this does for Hayes immediately? Is it better for him because now that defense is going to be more valuable, or does it cut into his power and now you've got a good contact hitter who doesn't walk, doesn't hit for a lot of power, and is good in left field but not irreplaceable?
I think it helps him. Honestly, I think Addit had a pretty good comment that it probably doesn't hurt speedy guys like Mullins and Hayes because the newer dimensions could lead to more doubles and triples, which I think is probably true. Hayes, he's a guy that just lashes the ball across the field. So if he can just slash the ball into the gap or down the line, he can use his speed. He's a pretty fast guy to turn it into a double or triple, even if the home runs come down. And I do think, he wasn't great in center field, but he was better than I think anyone expected him to be when he played out there for a little bit. And he's got good range, especially for left field. So I think he can get back on the ball. And I think ultimately it would help him, but he just has to stay healthy. That's always going to be the story for Austin Hayes.
Yeah, a lot of my same thoughts exactly. You learn to adjust, like I mentioned. If Austin Hayes realizes, hey, like that wall is impacting me, and I'm not able to get over that wall with my power, okay, become more of a line drive hitter. And I know that's a lot easier said than done. I totally get that, but work on that now in spring training, prepare for that kind of full season. I don't know how the arm rates. Like I haven't looked at his defensive metrics or anything lately, and I can't tell you off the top of my head off previous footage. You guys know better than I would there. Is the arm strong enough to hang out there in this new deeper left field? If it is, then yeah, I think Hayes could benefit a lot. If you eventually move Mullins out of center field, though, would that hurt him defensively? Yes, he can go get it, but I know there are a lot of questions about the arm that Mullins has out there. But yeah, I think this does help Hayes as long as he's healthy. And there are some prospects coming up that I think it could benefit a lot as well. So.
And I also want to see what effect Ryan Fuller and Matt Borgsalty might have on Hayes, and maybe if they can help him get that walk rate up a little bit. Because, Hayes is 26. He'll turn 27 in July. But he still only has 205 games in the major leagues with 801 plate appearances. So you're not looking at a lot of time in the majors. And I just wonder if he could have a healthy, full season with this new regime of hitting coaches, if they could help out a little bit. Not to say that I think Hayes is all of a sudden going to be leading the team in walks, but if you could get that walk rate up to a little bit of a more respectable level, I think it'd be much easier for Hayes to stick.
All you got to do is leave that calendar in the clubhouse on September, and he's going to be an all-star. I mean, it seems like he comes at the end of the season every year and just kills the ball, and then, the rest of the year is kind of an adventure. But, I think that just comes with, like you said, the consistency he hasn't really had. Even last year, he missed some time. So I think if he can just get in a rhythm early, maybe we can start to see those September numbers translate a little earlier in the year.
And I mean, it's, Hayes wasn't at the alt site, right? He was up at the major league level with the team. So we know Ryan Fuller was at the alt site. Mountcastle was there, right? So, and that helped. So, and we heard all the reports coming out of the alt site, the different strategies and things that the organization we're working Mountcastle with. So, if you can now, with Ryan Fuller being at the major level and working with Austin Hayes every single day, maybe you start to do some of those same strategies. And if it helps Ryan Mountcastle, we saw that walk rate really take off, especially at the end of the year. If you can help Austin Hayes a little bit, then yeah, he becomes more of a more complete player. And I think thinking is back to the wall as well, like defensively speaking, the one thing that I do have questions about that concerns me a little bit is I think I remember during that press conference them saying like the spring training facility in Sarasota isn't going to have this adjustment. So are we just going to have these guys go out there like 2 or 3 days before the season starts and learn how to play that left field? That would be a little challenging, and that is a little bit concerning. But other than that, it's all fine, I think.
Yeah, I heard that too, and hopefully they can come up with some way to address that it's not they're having to learn on the fly, against Toronto on opening day if opening day happens on schedule, which is a separate topic altogether. Going back to the Pirates for a minute, I had this thought earlier, which was if you go back to when the Pirates were good for a few years, like 2012 to 2014 or 2015, they had Starling Marte in left field with Andrew McCutchen in center for most of that run. And those were really two major league center fielders. Marte happens to come along as McCutchen, who was an MVP winner in his prime and was still in his prime when Marte arrived. McCutchen's entrenched in center field. Marte has to move over to left. So the Pirates had left field and center field locked down for a while with those two players. And I think that while that is kind of a perfect storm scenario that doesn't happen often, it's something the Orioles could realistically strive for with the amount of outfielders that they have in this farm system. Colton Cowser comes to mind, but you could even look at a guy like a Zach Watson. His speed is going to matter a lot more in left field, whereas before I think you might have looked at it and thought, well, the defense isn't going to matter that much in left. It's going to be, can he hit for enough power to stay out there? Now the defense is going to matter a little bit more, and the same for Ryan McKenna. Honestly, I think that this opens an opportunity for McKenna to get more at-bats next year because you're going to want that defense out there, especially if, and I hope this doesn't happen, but if Hayes, Mullins, or Santander misses time with an injury, having McKenna out there every night seems like a better idea with the amount of ground you have to cover now.
I want to see McKenna get a lot more at bats because he didn't get that fair shake last year at the major league level. And he has reached this offensively speaking, he's reached this DJ Stewart, Chant Cisco stage where you put him down in Norfolk and he's going to hit 400, 450, completely rake, look like an all-star Barry Bonds out there. And then you get to the major league level and there's no rhythm to this playing time. And that was frustrating, I think. Can he hit? Can he become a successful everyday major league outfielder? I don't know. I think that is a big question. We've talked about some of the weaknesses Zach Watson has, some of the things that we'd like to see improved for Zach Watson as well, as he continues to move up the ladder. Questions about his overall offensive game. But, both those guys, that speed, like if they hit one in that power alley out there, then they're going to be standing on third base with their speed. Right. And there's no question about the defense, what they can do in left field, even with the few extra feet they have to cover. So this could be a huge benefit. It's just now questions of, are they going to be able to translate that bat to the major league level?
Yeah, and I like this comment from Vivek. Keep McKenna in outfield and move Santander to DH to keep him healthy. Yeah, I think that you could do that, rotate him in there every once in a while. And I completely agree. But, he's just got to have some consistent at-bats because I think he can hit. He can clearly field. You got to find out if he's either just going to be a defensive replacement fourth outfield type or if maybe there's something more there. And you also have guys like Dante Williams, Reed Trimble, who's obviously hurt now. But come to think of it, there's not really too many plotting outfielders among the outfield prospects for the Orioles. I mean, Kyle Stowers has played center field in a pinch. Maybe Robert Newsom's a little, limited. But for the most part, I feel like you have guys that can go get the ball and can hit the ball too.
There was one more outfielder that I instantly thought of right as soon as we started recording, talking about defensively, who will have no issues whatsoever with whatever changes they want to make to left field at Camden Yards. The bat is a whole other issue. I know that. But Johnny Reiser, come on, put him out there in left field. He'll be good.
You can put up fences all throughout the outfielder. He's going to hop him and he's going to catch the ball.
Make it 20 feet. No issues there.
You think he could hop the 13-foot fence?
Easily. And catch it. But they'll call it a home run anyway for some reason.
The only thing that I feel like is going to get lost here is, do you guys remember when Manny Ramirez caught the ball and high-fived the fan at Camden Yards, and then I think threw out Aubrey Huff at first base?
Vaguely.
Yeah.
You're talking about throwing out Aubrey Huff. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah. Always a good thing. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, because I just realized now that would have been a fly ball over Manny's head on the new dimensions because there's no way he would have caught it. So that would have been a lot less memorable. Unless, he had somehow cut off his own throw or something. I don't know.
I also remember some weird throw he made when David Newhan went for an inside the park home run randomly in Boston too. So Manny Ramirez, always an adventure out there in left field.
Yeah. And these players, like I said, they're going to learn to adjust to that wall and their dimensions whenever this lockout is over and they can actually practice on this field and get used to it. But, this isn't completely shutting everything down out there in left field. And I just feel like there's nothing else to talk about. So I know why a lot of fans are kind of, up in arms about this. But until we see it in action, I just don't think it's going to be a major deal. And I think a couple weeks into the year, everyone's going to forget about it. No one's going to notice it. And home runs are still going to be flying out there at a decent rate where, again, it's just going to be another day at Camden Yards, hopefully. Because
Yeah, the only people I think have a right to be angry are the ones that had season tickets in one of those 1,000 seats. I mean, come on, you got to find a new place to sit. Zach's got it right. They're not going to remove the seats he's sitting in to move the fence back there, right?
No, they're not going to bring the fence back. I think it would be about 380 or 390 feet to the corner. So there's not going to happen unless you want to really make Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge's, at bats there a lot harder. Definitely not going to happen. Move on to some really good news that we got today. DL Hall tweeted out this afternoon, towing the rubber for the first time in about 8 months today. So he's back throwing on the mound after an injury cut his season short in 2021. He had resumed throwing late in 2021. I think it was in November or December. So we knew that he was building back up from the injury, but this is certainly excellent news. Hall is on the 40-man roster, so he is affected by the lockout. But when the lockout ends, we're looking forward to seeing him somewhere in the minors. So, Nick, I'll start with you on this. Just your reaction to him being back on the mound and what you think we might see from him in 2022 once he's able to get his season started.
It's huge to know that he's back on the mound throwing again. It's still a couple more weeks away from hopefully a spring training. So I know there's a comment, I can't remember where it said where he's going to be ready to go. He thinks he'll be ready to go by opening day, which is amazing. I am still a little scared, to be completely honest. He went a long time without throwing a baseball. And so didn't have surgery. So I'm curious to see how the Orioles roll him along. What's going to be the innings limit, how long into the season before he starts, because I've mentioned before, I think it's going to be like a Michael Baumann type season where it's going to be a couple weeks into the year before we see him in Delmarva or Aberdeen making a rehab start. And then I think he's going to be in Bowie for the biggest chunk of the year. I also think I said in earlier episodes that his timeline, I think Major League timeline, wasn't heavily impacted, but now I think it is by a couple months. I don't know if we see him in the major leagues this year, but starting in 2023, DL Hall could be a contender for that major league rotation.
Yeah, it's great that he's throwing. I mean, we saw a month or two ago that he was actually throwing the ball, but now he's on the mound throwing the ball, pitching. I guess I don't really know the progression that it takes to go from this point to being ready to throw 5-6 innings in an official game, but I would think, if he doesn't start on time, it shouldn't be too far after. And I don't know. I kind of agree with Nick that it's going to slow him down a little bit, and he might not make it to the majors. But Vivek asks if there's any thoughts on him starting as a multi-inning reliever role, kind of like Dylan Bundy did in 2016. So if he does make it to the majors this year, then I think that would probably be the case, kind of like Michael Baumann did at the end of last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think if he does make the majors this year, I expect it's going to kind of be in a multi-inning relief role because it's going to be an easier way to control his innings. And, I think our expectation right now is that the Orioles aren't going to be playing meaningful games late in the 2022 season. So there's no sense in trying to push him too far, and putting him in the bullpen would be an easy way to manage his innings. What I would be curious to see, and this is getting way ahead, is how would they manage him going to the rotation in 2023? Because that's where you want to put him. Do you find a way to stretch him out over the offseason and spring training so that he's ready to go on day one? Or do you maybe put him back in the minors for a little bit? But I would say that if Hall does reach the majors this year, it will be late in the year and probably in a relief role.
That's interesting too, to think about it. I almost wonder if that's what we see with Michael Baumann even this year. Do they start him in Norfolk again to let him stretch out more? Because I think there were a lot of more mental issues there with Baumann. It was more mental than physical. And I think some of his struggles later in the year. So it'd be curious to see if they do the same thing with DL Hall, even because, yeah, I don't see him getting very many innings at all this year. You're probably not going to see him go 7 innings deep in a game at Bowie. I don't think so. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him, but he's back. He's electric. He's one of the more electric pitching prospects in all of baseball. He's a top 3, top 4 prospect in the top farm system in all of baseball. So it's fun to see him back there in the mound throwing again.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind with DL Hall is the service time implications and whether or not that's affected by the CBA, because a healthy DL Hall is absolutely a prospect you're going to weigh that consideration with of whether or not to hold him back in the minors a little bit longer to gain the extra year of team control. Now, I'm hoping that if we had to wait for this lockout to drag on for a while, that the end result is that we get something that resolves this issue with service time manipulation. But with that in mind, if that's still in place, then that's going to affect the timeline for him getting into the majors. And I think it makes it more likely that we don't see him until 2023.
Yeah, it would be nice to just consider, hey, is this person ready for the major leagues? Okay, bring him up, instead of, oh, but what if we save him, we can get an extra year. It's no fun.
I was thinking too. My mind's just wandering now, thinking about DL Hall in the future. Like, would either of you be mad if 3 years from now you're talking about Michael Baumann and DL Hall out of the bullpen as one of them is your 8? Those guys alternate being your 8-9 guys in the back end of a bullpen.
Absolutely not. Tyler Wells, DL Hall, Michael Baumann, to close things out in the World Series. No, I don't mind at all. You got Gene Pinto will be in the rotation. There's plenty of room to go around.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, you see what Josh Hader does in Milwaukee. DL Hall can probably have that kind of impact out of the bullpen if he's a reliever. If that's what DL Hall is going to be his prime, I will gladly take that. And, I can't tell you how many times I've missed 2016 Zach Britton over the last few years. So while you don't necessarily have the goal in mind to develop an elite reliever, if that's what Baumann and Hall become, I'd be perfectly happy with that.
Yeah. That ground ball rate that I know Zach's pointed out many times how high that was. If that sticks around, I don't know. I'm thinking more I'm going to be thinking more bullpen, but we're going way too far. It's January. What else are we going to talk about?
So Eric Capps has a question here, and this goes back to something we discussed a lot in 2021. Would you all consider being announcers for the Ironbirds? I think you all would crush it. Aberdeen did not have an announcer last year when games were aired on MILB TV from Lido's Field. It was often either natural sound or the visiting team's radio feed was piped in and played over the video. So with that in mind, would you consider being announcers for the Ironbirds? I'll just ask either one of you.
Eric, are you hiring or do you work for the Ironbirds? Yeah, I mean, I'll do it. Sure, why not? That would be fun. That someone needs to do it. I don't care if it's us or anybody. I want some announcers in that stadium for this season.
Yeah, there was speaking with Tim DeJean last week. If you haven't listened to that interview, definitely go check that out. You miss so much learning about who these prospects are, and we know that Orioles fans are watching MILB TV. Especially, and this year might be another year where they're often most nights they're tuning into MILB TV to watch DL Hall or Drew Rahm. I'll throw that name out there. One of these, or Gene Pinto in Aberdeen, right? They're going to want to watch him. No, we're not working for free, Simkin. But yeah, like Orioles fans are going to want to watch those guys, and you lose so much. The natural sound thing was cool, I get, for a night or two, but like, it's you learn the backstories of these guys and who they are as people. More about who they are as prospects, and you really miss that, I think, down in Aberdeen, because that's a good product that they're going to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who wouldn't want to call Kobe Mayo's home run off the batting cage roof at Ripken Stadium, which we know is going to happen, probably if not opening day, then within the first 3 or 4 games.
Yeah. I know you guys are closer. I know Bob's right there, and Zach's closer. I'm a significant difference. I'm here in the mountains of Virginia, and I'm about to have a second child in April. So moving to Aberdeen would be difficult for me, but you need social media guy. DM me. Let me know.
Hey, and if we can work remotely, all the better.
Yeah. So we do have our updated top 50 prospect list coming out next week. It's going to be on BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com. You'll be able to read it there. You'll also be able to listen to us talk about it as we have in past shows. We started out in early 2020 with our first ever top 30 list. We continue that into 2021. And then last year around June, early July, Bob suggests that we should take it up to 50. And I read that and I thought, okay, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge. And then I ended up putting a list together that I think had 65 players on it and then had to cut from that. I think Nick had a similar experience. Bob, I believe you maintain a top 100 of your own, correct? Or a top 75 at least?
Yeah, it's top 100. I have a problem. And I also list out every other player in the organization beyond that just to keep tabs. But yeah, it's fun. I like doing this kind of stuff. So, it's I could change it from day to day, especially once you get past 50, 30. It's a lot harder to really nail it down, but it's a fun exercise.
Yeah. And I pulled my rough draft up that I've been working on. I think it's almost solid. Like, I don't know who you guys are going to have number one. You guys will have to tune in next week to find out who the number one prospect's going to be. But I also have a list of guys that aren't in my top 50 right now, and I think they're not going to make the top 50. But like, there are some really, really fun, interesting names that I'm leaving out of the top 50. Guys with legitimate, and I'm not saying this like as an Orioles homer here. Like, I'm taking the orange glasses off and saying there are guys who could be major league contributors at some point, I think, in the future, which that's what makes it a little bit more fun. As challenging as it is so much fun.
So Vivek has a question that I actually can't answer yet because I have not finalized my list, but I'll see, Bob, Dick, if you have answers you want to share tonight. Who was the biggest riser in your list?
Braylon Tavera, easy answer.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head like what our last Patreon top 50 update looked like, but honestly, I think I can tell you who some of the biggest fallers are going to be. That should be an easy one to figure
Yeah.
out. Might be Kobe Mayo. And I know he was pretty high, but as a sneak peek, I've got Kobe Mayo pretty high up on my list. We'll say that.
You guys check that out next week on the air here and on the Verge. And over at BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com, we'll have the full top 50 up over there with reports on every player. And then we will be in the message board discussion there as well. The last time around, we posted our personal top 50s in the message board thread. We'll probably do the same again this time around. So be sure to check that out. And between now and next week, be sure to go to BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com for all the great sports coverage that is on the site there and join the message board and participate in discussion with fellow readers as well as writers on the site. And continue to follow us on Twitter at BSL on the Verge. Before we wrap up tonight, kind of an action-packed show here, so I'll throw it to Nick first. Any final thoughts you want to add?
I love this international process now. I'm curious. I think I mentioned off air to you guys. I think the one question that we didn't get to ask Kobe Perez that I would love to talk to him about was what happens if there is an international draft brought in. I don't know if it's going to be this CBA or that's going to be something that gets phased in the next couple of years, but I'd love to know what impact that would have. But for right now, this organization continues to trend in the right direction. A lot of questions still to be answered, but they're laying the groundwork for sustained success. You can complain all you want, and I share those complaints, and I get it about the major league product. It's impossible to watch some nights. I totally get that, but like they're playing the long game here, and I'm on board, 100%.
Yeah, completely agree. And I just say thank you, Kobe Perez. Thank you to the Orioles for continuing to allow us to talk to these guys. And it really just makes us better at what we're doing because we get to learn more and then we can disperse that knowledge as best as we can. So hopefully that keeps coming along in the future. And it was a fun show.
Yeah, thank you to Kobe Perez for joining us, and thank you for listening to this episode. As I mentioned earlier, be sure to follow us on Twitter at BSL on the Verge, and to check out content over there between now and next week when we unveil our top 50 prospect list on the podcast and on BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to On the Verge.